Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 5, Episode 2 of the WeCOACH Podcast, presented by our partner Hudl on WIS Sports Radio. Hudl is leveling the playing field for women in sports, both through the technology they create and important events like Breakthrough Summit, co-created with WeCOACH. All podcast episodes are inspired by collective input from our WeCOACH community. Please join us every 2 weeks for thought-provoking discussions focused on timely topics of national significance. I'll be your host, Vanessa Fuchs, CEO of WeCOACH, a one-of-a-kind nonprofit dedicated to offering year-round growth and leadership development to recruit, advance, and retain women coaches in all sports and levels. This podcast is a co-production of WIS Sports Radio and WeCOACH. We look forward to bringing you new shows dropping every other Thursday. Today, June 23rd, is an important day. June 23rd marks the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And in recognition of the golden anniversary, WeCOACH is launching our year-long celebratory campaign, Move the Numbers. The campaign title is significant for 3 reasons. First, it represents our WeCOACH mission to dramatically increase the numbers in terms of women coaches in all sports and levels. Second, we're fundraising to increase the number of year-round growth and leadership programs. And most importantly, third, these additional leadership programs will then allow us to impact greater numbers of women coaches. And to kick off our 50th celebration, we have 3 coaches as our special guests today. These women have over 75 years of coaching experience and have won an astounding 13 national titles combined. Our first guest is a longtime personal friend and mentor of mine, Dr. Cecile Reynaud, who served as FSU's head women's volleyball coach for 26 years. She retired in 2001 and has been coaching me up as her mentee ever since. In 2016, Cecile was honored with the Fryer Award, USA Volleyball's highest award that's given to an individual who's exemplified leadership and service in volleyball for over 30 years. In 2018, Cecile was our WeCOACH Board President. She has published several books in her illustrious career, including a new book released by Human Kinetics in May entitled Winning Ways of Women Coaches, featuring 20 of the most remarkable women coaches in the world. These women know how to not only win in their sport, but they are winning on Amazon as well, as it's already the #1 bestseller on Amazon in the sociology of sport category. Generously, Cecile and the contributing authors have directed all proceeds to WeCOACH, for which we are incredibly grateful. And speaking of contributing authors, 2 of them are with us today. Carol Owens, Associate Head Coach of Notre Dame Women's Basketball, also a former WeCOACH board member, and Felecia Mulkey. Coach Fee is the head coach of Baylor's Acrobatics and Tumbling program. Coaches, thank you for joining as guests today, and most importantly, thank you for your generous support you've given to WeCOACH.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for having me.
So excited to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Cecile, we're going to start with you. And before we get to the book, I felt obligated to start with Title IX. It's been 50 years since Title IX was passed in 1972. And I just wanted to listen to what you describe as the greatest advancements women have made in sport. What have you been most proud of?
Well, first of all, I'm proud to have lived through all of this history. I was in college when this law passed in 1972, so clearly I'm the oldest one on the podcast. But in 1976, I got hired as a graduate student at Florida State University as the head volleyball coach. And then in 1978, I got hired full-time. And now I look at all the staff members that everybody had. And, back then we did it all. So we drove the 15-passenger van with 15 people and luggage. We drive all the way back from Miami overnight. We couldn't afford to stay. We called it our own scorers. We didn't have athletic trainers. And so to me, it's exciting to watch the staff expansion, the travel, chartered buses, chartered planes, no more having to stay 4 people in a hotel room, and then the scholarship opportunities for more women to compete. And, these past few weeks, I've watched our teams play on national television, and it's just exciting to see them in beautiful uniforms, fantastic facilities. And then I also think the success that we've seen of all the women's teams in the Olympic Games has been a thrill. So we have come a long way, and it's just been fun to sit through that whole history.
Couldn't agree more. You talk about the history. What we're going to try to do through some WeCOACH 50th anniversary events this year is to capture that history, those stories. It's so important that we make every possible opportunity to preserve this important history. Before we move forward, I just wanted to see Carol or Coach Fee, do you have anything to add in regard to the impact of Title IX?
I'm just grateful. I won't go into what my sport is, but we created it to increase opportunities for females at the collegiate level where there was not an opportunity for them before. So all the work that Cecile has done and everyone, I feel like I'm standing on their shoulders, and I just hope that I can do as much in my time so that the next generation can stand on mine. I mean, I'm just super grateful to be able to do everything we're doing. And I also have, I've been coaching in college for a few years, and to be able to see it change and evolve and watch these women on national television, it's just amazing.
I too stand on the backs of these women that paved the way for Title IX. And I just remember being in high school and, a freshman, and listening to a lot of the juniors and seniors that played volleyball, softball, and basketball. And, such and such got a scholarship. And it was such a monumental thing at the time that we celebrated it. We celebrated it. The whole school celebrated when someone got a scholarship, especially an athletic scholarship. So, I too am grateful. And when you see the growth of women's sports, this is 50 years of Title IX is amazing, and will continue to grow. Continue to grow all of our games. So excited to see what it has led to be, and still growing.
So good. Carol, you mentioned the women who paved the way and the growth of women's sports. A lot of people don't realize Title IX allowed increased participation in sport for not only girls and women, but for boys and men. But what others also don't realize is we've seen a drastic decline in women coaches during that 50-year span. We used to have over 90% women coaching women's sports in the 70s. And since that time, we're now sitting at a stagnant 42%. And so it speaks to our mission here at WeCOACH is trying to continue to elevate those numbers and create awareness of the decline and build up the pipeline of who's next in terms of the future for our women coaches. Cecile, let's talk about this awesome resource you've created for us. And can you share your inspiration behind Winning Ways of Women Coaches and why you wanted to do this project with women coaches?
Well, let me go back to 2005. I put a book together called She Can Coach. And when I was, as a young coach, I was reading as much as I possibly could. And I found that everything I was reading was by male coaches, highly successful. And I was learning a lot. But I thought, I really want to know what the best women that are coaching are thinking and what they're doing. So I had worked with Human Kinetics Publishing on a couple of volleyball books. And I said, I really want to dig into women coaches and see if we can't get some resources out there. And they thought it was a great idea. And as I shared that thought with people around the country, I said, we're going to write a book about great women coaches. And they said, oh, Gino Ariema with UConn basketball. And I went, no. And then they'd say, oh, Anson Dorrance at UNC soccer. And I went, great coach, but nope, that's not it. And then they said, Mike Kendrea from Arizona softball. And I went, okay, I really have to do this because we want them to know who the best women coaching are. And so Human Kinetics let me do that. And so then in 2020, I contacted him, said, I think it's time we need to do this again. And thankfully they agreed.
Could you also, Cecile, talk about the process? How you went about putting this resource together? How long were you working on this project?
Well, the process is pretty interesting. First, you have to kind of come up with a proposal if you want to do a book, and it's a pretty extensive process. So then you have an outline of possible topics. You think about contributors who you might have access to or who you might, be able to work your way to get in touch with. And then, of course, the publishing company puts you on a timeline because there's going to be, there's publishing dates and everything they have to do at the publishing company. And it took about 2 years. And of course, we went through COVID. And so it was interesting. When we first started contacting the coaches, everybody was free. Nobody was doing anything. Tara Vanderveer was skiing in Minnesota and said, I have nothing to do, Cecile. I'll be happy to talk to you as long as you want to talk. And then, as we went along, then all of a sudden things started to ratchet back up and more action. And then people went through, they started winning national championships. They were getting ready to leave for the Olympic Games. And so I was just trying to fit all this together. But it was about a 2-year process.
And how did you decide on chapter topics and which coaches were going to contribute?
Well, that's really when the fun starts. So I had a list of topics I thought were relevant and also wanted each coach to share their thoughts on team culture. We tried to add that in each book, even if that wasn't, part of what your assignment was. And then trying to match up the people we thought we could get with those titles. So you just kind of have to plug it in. We started going after the top female coaches in the world, and we reached out to 2 very successful coaches in Canada. And we wanted to expand it too, not just to the United States, but we got 2 very talented, highly successful women from Canada contribute. We went to Australia, and thankfully Liz Mason from Athlete Assessments connected us with 2 brilliant women from Australia. And then we also wanted to include coaches that were in men's sports. So Jen Welter from the NFL and then Rachel Balkovec from Major League Baseball. I thought that was an important perspective for women to think about, that they can coach in men's sports and be successful. Then I started putting the pieces together, and it's just a complex process. I want you to think back to school when you'd work on a group project and you might have 3 or 4 people. But I was working with 20 extremely successful and very, very busy women in coaching. And so, it was like the 20 most popular, smartest people in class and trying to nail them down. And I was just fortunate enough to have these women share their time and their expertise. And I'm so grateful to all of them. So I think it was enjoyable for me, but I do hope that this resource will serve the purpose of supporting WeCOACH and that organization that I think is striving to help support and retain and recruit women coaches. But I hope it'll be serve to really help coaches do a better job all around.
We're so excited for the success of the book already. Cecile, again, we can't thank you enough. You mentioned the publisher's reaction and mentioning Gino and Anson, and it reminded me of my neighbor across the street comes over. He goes, "Hey, Vanessa, I heard about the new job you've taken on with WeCOACH. I actually just interviewed a coach today, Shalon Pillow." So Carol, you'll appreciate this story. He says, "Yeah, I interviewed Shalon and we were doing a feature story on a former coach that she had. And he must have had just a tremendous impact on her life because she just raved about him. Some coach named Pat." And I told my neighbor, I said, "You realize Shalon Pillow played at Tennessee?" And she's talking about the legendary Pat Summitt. And it was a pretty funny moment. But Cecile, you mentioned in the book that Pat's an incredible mentor to you. And I was just wondering if you'd be willing to share some tidbits that she's left with you.
Well, I was fortunate enough to get to meet her back in the early 80s. I was coaching with a World University Games team, and she was coaching the Pan Am team. And we just got to spend a lot of time together. And, I tried to talk her into writing a book a long time ago. I even had the title. I said, let's write a book. It could be called First Class or Coach, because, we were always talking about traveling. But, what I learned from her is it's really important for us to reach out to others that you're not competing against and that, reach across sports. I could call her about anything, whatever was going on with our team. And I had a safe person to talk to because she wasn't a competitor. But, she just worked hard and worked long, but she had a lot of fun. And so that's really what she left me with, to, take care of the people, enjoy the process, work hard, and success will come to you. So I was really fortunate to have her as a good friend.
Pat Summitt cemented a legacy, obviously, and talking about really successful women's basketball programs. I want to pivot now to Carol, who Notre Dame certainly has had their fair share of success. Carol, you've been coaching for almost 30 years, and during that span, you've been able to serve as an assistant coach, an associate head coach, and a head coach. And so you've got obviously a great deal of experience from a variety of seats. What's the primary role of an associate or an assistant coach, and how important is that role to the success of a program?
I believe the primary role for an assistant or associate coach is to support your head coach. We have our responsibilities, but as we know, there's always duties unassigned. And that's what we're called to do, is support the head coach. And I think, with the expansion of positions and all of that, the support staff is very important, in particular the assistant coaches. And we have our responsibilities, and I think our responsibility primarily is the support. And then two, to make sure that, I think ultimately, to not have to be micromanaged, to be able to hone into your own responsibilities so the coach doesn't have to worry. And that's support in itself. So I just think that we are the gateways into a lot of different areas that come up with our jobs. Academics, performance, obviously the student athletes. We are the gateways, and we speak a lot of times on behalf of our head coach. And so I think overall that falls under the umbrella of support.
So good. I love what you talk about there as far as thinking like a head coach in your chapter of Winning Ways. Your chapter is entitled Changing Coaching Roles, Advancing Your Career, and it discusses serving in these different roles. What's some advice you'd give to young coaches serving in these roles?
I think you have to know what your why is. When you come into coaching, I've met a lot of assistants that have come from playing professionally, or they are student athletes and they want to get into coaching. And you have to understand, why are you getting into coaching? Because there's a lot of responsibilities. There's a lot of work that goes into it, not just stepping on the basketball court and coaching your players. That's a small percentage of what we all do, but you have to know your why. And I say, if you're not in it to first and foremost be a mentor, along with coaching young ladies and helping them get better, then you're in the wrong sport or the wrong field, because you are going to have to do things that are selfless, and you have to be a selfless individual, and you have to be able to want to serve, and not think about the money initially. Think about being the best you can be with the responsibilities you have, and being the best you can be for our student athletes.
Well said. And for our listeners, if you'd like to hear Coach Carol Owens why, you're going to have to purchase a copy of the book. Well said. You worked with another legendary coach, Coach Muffet McGraw, for a long time. I love the story in the book that you share of your hand-drawn fax cover sheet that you created for Muffet with mountains and stick figures, and you actually say that's what got you the job. But I digress. You won 2 national championships on her staff, and now you're working with a new first-time head coach, Neil Ivey. And
yes.
What's that like, transitioning to work with a first-time head coach?
It is a transition, but in our case, Neil Ivey played for Coach McGraw, and she has a lot of her personality in terms of coaching is, as far as coaching goes. But for my position, I recruited Neil, so it's a different dynamic, and I serve her, but I also serve as an advisory, as an advisor, and we transitioned new head coaches during COVID, which was very, very difficult. And we had limited access to our players, to facilities and all of that. I mean, you can imagine how that all played out, but there is a transition, because in that whole process, the head coach is, a new head coach is trying to understand who they are as a head coach. And you have to allow that. And you have to support and you have to give advice when it's needed, but also let them see who they are in the process. And so it's been a beautiful thing. And we've had a quick turnaround. We had some young individuals that were here. Of course, COVID, we were, reinventing the program because we lost so much in 2019. All 5 of our players went to the draft. And so we were starting new. And it's been a quick turnaround since then in terms of the maturation of our program and where we are now. And it's good to see it. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to allow the coach to be themselves, but also know their way into this coaching field. But you got to know what kind of kids they want to coach. What type of kids should we recruit? It's different in that way. But I've really enjoyed it. And the transition wasn't as hard as you might think it is, but the transition was good. It was challenging, especially during COVID, but it's been very, very good.
I can imagine how special that is for you to be able to now work with one of your former players. I had that similar opportunity, coming back to Florida State and being able to, after Sue Semrau had impacted me so significantly during my playing career, come back and then be able to support her as her advocate and sport administrator. So I can't imagine how special that relationship is to you. And you're one of the few staffs. We talked about the numbers earlier. Currently, 42% women coaching women's sports in Division I, and your staff is a bit unique. There's not a lot of staffs out there that are made up of all 4 women's basketball staff being female coaches, and just wanted to hear from you what that's like working on an all-female staff.
You know what? I'm just really excited about working with very good people, very good in their field. I think we have some highly qualified women that have played at a very high level and, has had great experience in coaching, and we just happen to be female. And then I'm excited about that. I'm always excited about women succeeding, and to be able to be around successful female leaders is amazing. I learn so much from them on a daily basis. And we know that we're not just coaches, we're mentors to young women. And I think that's important. And so it's been great for our young ladies because they can see themselves in us. And I think that's why the coaching tree from Notre Dame is so broad.
Well, we at WeCOACH agree. We certainly recognize there's power when men and women role models are impacting not only these young women college athletes, but also the young men male athletes. And so we recognize the importance of having both men and women in coaching. We certainly would like to see the numbers on the women's side continue to grow and get back to a level that's well above 50%. We have a saying through WeCOACH that if she can see her, she can be her. And that's exactly what you're talking about there. Carol, you've been very intentional to serve on several boards throughout your career. I mentioned your role with WeCOACH. You've served on the WBCA board, Black Coaches and Administrators Board. You've immersed yourself also with USA basketball teams. And so I wanted to just hear what's gained by engaging in these ways. How have these experiences impacted your coaching career?
I always want to be around good leaders. And what a way to be inspired by being on several boards, including the WeCOACH organization, where you're around some successful people, especially in leadership, because that's what that we're in the business of leadership. And that was a way that I was able to grow in my profession and in the sport. And I wanted to give back to the game. I wanted to be someone that was relied on to give of their time and serve of their time in the area of sports.
I love what you said. We're in the business of leadership, and we can't thank you enough for your leadership and impacting this next generation of leaders. I want to turn our attention now to Coach Felecia Mulkey. You're coaching a sport at Baylor, acrobatics and tumbling. Tell us a little bit about what your sport consists of, Coach Fee.
Thanks, Vanessa. I will keep it short because I could go on forever about my sport. So acrobatics and tumbling is a sport that I think it's the only sport that was ever created for women by women. It was created by women, female administrators and coaches about, I think, 13 years ago. I can't believe I'm saying that, 13 years ago. But we created it very intentionally to meet the interests and abilities of young women at the collegiate level. So it is the evolution of different disciplines of gymnastics. So right now, there's tens of thousands of young women graduating every year from high school that have trained in all different disciplines of gymnastics. And there's not a lot of things for them to do at the collegiate level. There's college gymnastics, which is a very specific skill set that you need to have. And then for a while, the other option was, well, maybe I could be a cheerleader and cheer on the sideline, which is a great opportunity if that's what you want to do. We created something to sit right in the middle of those two opportunities. And it is made up, each of our rosters is made up about 40 women, and they're able to bring the skill set that they competed in high school and compete it at the collegiate level on behalf of their university. It is such a passion of mine and all of the women that are part of it right now, because we're watching lives change because of this. You know, one of my favorite things right now is to go out and recruit and speak to a group of young female athletes and watch their eyes light up because, you know, our sport's relatively new, if you think about it. And watch these young women realize like, oh my gosh, my career's not over. I still get to compete. So it is the way to explain it is a little bit of Cirque du Soleil, a lot of athleticism. It is for, you know, women of all shapes and sizes. You can come in and bring your specialty. There's bases, there's tops, there's tumblers. There's 6 events. A meet lasts about an hour and a half. There's 6 events. And I always tell people, if you have not been to a meet, just go. And you will be entertained. You do not even need to know what's going on yet. You'll figure that out slowly, or actually pretty quickly. It's pretty easy to figure out, I think, when you watch it and watch for what the deductions are and stuff. But it is, and I tell people here at Baylor, just come out and see it. I think it costs $5 to get into a meet. I'll refund your $5 if you did not have a good time. But it is just, for me, I'm passionate about it. We talk about Title IX, and that's the reason our sport's here is creating these opportunities for young women to compete at the collegiate level that literally did not exist 13 years ago. We're the only sport outside, I think, of football that started at the collegiate level and is now trickling down into the youth level. So now there's youth acrobatics and tumbling programs out there. We recruit from artistic gymnastics, but not the young women that are going to go to collegiate gymnastics. If you dig into gymnastics, you see how big that population is. And the young women that are coming to our teams are not going to collegiate gymnastics. It's not that they're not athletic enough or talented enough to go into collegiate gymnastics. They just have a different skill set that can be utilized in our sport. And so we recruit from all of the different disciplines of gymnastics, power tumbling, acrobatic gymnastics, artistic gymnastics, and then also high level competitive cheer. Because if you look at that, those are actually gymnasts that have gone over and are competing in this amazing thing. So if you have not seen it, I suggest everybody go Google it and take a look at it. You can watch a highlight video for Baylor if you want to Google Baylor highlight video. But it is really a fun sport. I will mention this, Vanessa, since you guys were talking about female opportunities. It's exciting that every school that adds a sport, we started with 6 schools about 13 years ago, and we're now at 43. And it continues to grow. We're now an NCAA emerging sport and will be an NCAA championship sport very soon, within the next 2 years. Every school that adds is 40 plus opportunities for women to compete at the collegiate level. But what I'm even more passionate about is we also created career opportunities. 100% of our head coaches right now are female. I think 99% of all of our coaches are female right now. And not that men could not coach our sport. They totally could. It just hasn't happened yet. So we are really excited about that number. And about 75% of our current coaches are former acrobatics and tumbling student athletes. So a young coaching group. So extremely grateful for WeCOACH and all of the training and support that you guys lend. But it's pretty exciting.
It is absolutely exciting and entertaining. And I agree, you've got to get out and watch a Baylor highlight video and you'll be automatically, instantaneously converted to a fan of acrobatics and tumbling. Thank you, Coach Fee. You're right. The rosters for your sport add significant numbers on the women's side. Many schools are still today, 50 years after Title IX, still struggling a bit to ensure their participation numbers in terms of the proportion of men and women competing in their athletics departments is in alignment with university enrollment. And it's such a great opportunity with acrobatics and tumbling because you are adding significant number of women with 40 plus on the roster. I was fortunate to return to Florida State at the time that we were launching our inaugural year of beach volleyball. It was sand volleyball at the time in 2010. And it has been tremendously exciting watching the growth of that sport. And now ESPN, their national championships, it's aired on all the prime ESPN channels. It's grown dramatically since 2010. And it was really fun to be one of the first schools right out of the gates at Florida State to host and start a team. And you've seen something similar evolving in your sport, which we're really, really excited about. You mentioned there's now 43 teams participating. You've coached your Baylor team to seven straight national titles. And get this, you've won all 11 national championships that have ever been at both Oregon and now Baylor combined. 11 national championships. How the heck have you done that?
Well, it has been fun. It has been a journey. And, I think part of it is just the excitement right now of all of the young women that come in that are able to do this at the collegiate level. You create a great culture on the team and they go out and they fight for it. I believe culture is the biggest thing to winning. Our group is very collaborative right now, our organization. So we compete very fiercely during the season. And then we get together at our coaches summit in the summer and we all teach each other everything. And then we go back at it and we fiercely compete again during the season. But I believe that the culture of a team is the key to victory. And I think, you got to get some talent and you've got to be able to coach the X's and O's and you have to do all that. But, there's all these old cliches, but hard work beats talent all the time. And, I saw that my first year when I came to Baylor. I had just left the University of Oregon and we had won coming off a championship and came down to Baylor and inherited a program. That was the first time in my career I had ever done that. At Oregon, I actually created the program and went out and recruited that inaugural roster. So walking into Baylor, walking into someone else's culture was a huge challenge for me. And one of the most important things that I've ever done in my career was to walk in and instead of, actually change a culture that was there. And it just wasn't my culture. I don't want to say it was bad. It just wasn't mine. It didn't work for what I wanted to do. So being able to come in that first year at Baylor and watch for 3 months as this team tried so hard to try to get out of everything instead of actually doing the work, just tried for 3 months to see what they could get out of. And we created a culture of accountability and started taking pride in the hard work and started taking pride in the discipline and taking ownership of who we were and deciding, letting them, a culture is what they believe they are, not what we as a coach want them to be. So that was, we won that first year at Baylor. We actually beat my team. I did not bring any athletes from Oregon with me to Baylor, and we went and won the national championship that year. And it was a storybook year, and it was about really about just the team pulling together, not necessarily being the most talented team, but we definitely were the best team. So I just try to recreate that. I've been trying to recreate that every year. And I've evolved and I've learned, and you definitely don't do things the way we did, 10 years ago. But it has, someone asked me this year after the championship, in an interview, are you addicted to winning? And I said, absolutely not, because I'm not going to always win, but I am addicted to the journey. And I really love watching that. And I think I just can, I'm going to try to do it again this year. I'm excited about the group we have coming in. And there's that, even though you'll have some returners, it's just going to be a different dynamic. It's just going to be a different culture this year, and being able to help them intentionally navigate that through the year, and then hopefully peak at the right time.
I love that. Addicted to the journey. And you do talk about that journey in your chapter of Winning Ways. But I wanted to jump back. You just came off of serving as a featured presenter at our Women Coaches Academy in Denver a few weeks ago. And our 43 women coaches that were a part of Class 51 had the fortune of listening to something that I recall. Now, I don't have my notes right in front of me, Coach Fee, but I recall you saying, and this isn't a direct quote, you will say it way better than I do, don't strive to build a team, build a culture. Culture breeds sustained winning. I think that's close to what you shared with our Women Coaches Academy members. And we can't thank you enough for making the trip to Denver to pour into our coaches. Let's talk a little more about your chapter in Winning Ways of Women Coaches. It's entitled Planning, Scheduling, and Delegating. And what are some of the keys you focused on in your chapter?
Just being detailed, and how that plays into the student athlete experience. And I'm not by nature a detailed person. I am at 50,000 feet all the time. I'm always thinking ahead and what can we do next and what can we do next. But as a coach, and especially as I started coaching and before I had a staff, I'm very lucky and have a staff to help me with all these things now. You really had to pay attention to the details of even just travel and what that looked like. And it was so helpful. I was, when Cecile and I talked about what chapter to do, and this was my topic, I really went back and thought through all of the little things that we have to think of. And from planning, it sounds so silly, but from planning your itinerary for a trip. And, one of the things I share in the chapter is my very first year at the University of Oregon, we ended up at this really high-end restaurant at a casino because, it was totally my fault. But my assistant coach had created this itinerary and she Googled it and, okay, yep, this is where we're going to go. And what we learned after that trip was, let's just not look for a restaurant. Let's actually look at the restaurant. And what is the budget? Because we just blew our entire budget at this one restaurant. But what do you do once you get there? Totally my fault, not my assistant's fault, because I did approve the itinerary. But thinking now, I can't say that hurt our student athlete experience for sure, because they enjoyed the heck out of that steak night and everything that went along with it. But, just how really careful planning from looking at what you want to do at the end of the year and then backing that out throughout the year. Really careful planning can not only save your mental health as a coach and really you have so many other things to think about during the season. Planning it out ahead of time, it can help you as a coach, but it can also really lend to the student athlete experience. Entitlement really hasn't hit our sport yet. They're all still really grateful to be there. But I like to spoil them when we're on the road. I don't want them to worry about anything. I want everything to be set and ready to go. And their study time is here and their treatment time is here. And when you're traveling, we have 45 on our team right now, but we travel 28 on our roster. So that's a huge number to manage. So my chapter is a lot about that, just digging in to planning everything from your trips to your yearly, when you're going to recruit and how to lay that all out in your calendar. And how if I'm lucky I have a staff, but what if I'm one of those new coaches that doesn't have a big staff yet? How do I handle that? And I hope that my chapter will help some of those new coaches and maybe some of the veteran coaches too, but some of those new coaches really be able to handle everything that's thrown at them by being able to get ahead of it and delegating. And if there's someone to delegate to, and then managing their time by planning out everything ahead of time.
Yeah, that was a great story of the high-end restaurant at the casino. Reminds me, our women's basketball team had made it to their very first ever ACC championship appearance in the championship game. Carol, I think we were playing your Notre Dame team, if I'm not mistaken. Sue takes the team out to a high-end steak restaurant. And this time it was intentional to spoil them a little bit and congratulate them for this achievement. And it backfired on her. Many of the kids thought the sit time was too long. It took too long for the food to come to the table. And many of them did not care for the sauces that were on their steak. So I saw one of our staff coming in the hotel later that night with bags of McDonald's. And it was to replace the fine dining at the steakhouse for our team. Too funny. But you spend a lot of time talking about that addiction to the journey and seeing it through the eyes of your student athletes. And one of the things you say is that you do this so that at the end of a season, they say, Coach, I would gladly do it all over again. And in my mind, you coaches, that has to be one of the highest compliments you can receive from one of your student athletes. And I mentioned you were at our Women Coaches Academy. Could you talk a little bit about your message to our Academy coaches? And also, how would you describe the Academy experience? You are now a returning faculty member of our academies. What's that experience like in your mind?
It is, well, I'll speak to that first because it is my favorite time of year. The energy in the room is just so, I spoke there once in person pre-COVID, and then we did the 2 virtual years, which were wonderful. Virtual, we made it work. But there is something about being in that room with all of these motivated women coaches that, oh my gosh, I just love it. And I suggest, I don't care if you've been coaching for 2 months or 20 years, you should apply and you should go to the Women's Coaches Academy. The connections and just to watch the cohort come together in the short time I was there, to watch them bond. I laughed, I cried. It was fantastic. So I said everyone should go. My chat, it was about team culture. And it was interesting because I went back and updated it, and I noted my PowerPoint stayed kind of the same. My messaging was the same, but my stories were different. And even in the 4 or 5 years I've been working with WeCOACH, I've evolved as a coach in the way that I approach things. And I think that's an important message. Like, let's keep evolving and don't lose our philosophy, but keep evolving. My chat is all about culture, and it's, a lot about intentionally navigating the culture. A lot of times coaches, I feel like, especially if you're inheriting a culture, if you walk into an existing program, but even if it's your own culture or even if it's your own team, we could blame an individual on the team or maybe a class. I've heard coaches do that. Well, if I can just get rid of the senior class, my culture is going to be a lot better. And my main message is, no, as a coach, we either create a culture or we allow it. So, we can't blame it on the student athletes that are there. We have to decide how we're going to navigate it and what we're going to do to create the culture we want. And then keeping in mind that, coming up with that logo at the beginning of the year, that catchphrase is helpful as a coach. And I know we do that. Hey, this is going to be this past year at Baylor. Our catchphrase was above the line, and our whole team meeting at the beginning was about above the line. And I love to hear my team talk about during the year, they would refer to above the line. But our culture is what that team thinks they are, not what I tell them they are at the beginning. And so my talk is a lot about that, navigating that, and how do we navigate the stages of team. And I refer to Dr. Bruce Tuckman's small groups. He wrote it. It's an older article. I was fascinated with it in college. I'm a huge nerd. So I've applied his 4 stages of team, or 4 stages of a small group. And I've applied it to team, and I've done it for years now. And it's really interesting. It's my favorite part, is just to watch them hit the forming stage, the storming, the norming, the performing. And I can watch my team go through it. I even discuss it with my team when they're going through those stages. And, so that my chat is about that and kind of educating about that. And then all of our sports are so different, and we compete. Our game days and meet days are so different. So just really kind of laying out that blueprint, and then allowing those that are there at the academy to try to, how could this work with my team? How could this work if I'm coaching field hockey? How could this work if I'm coaching tennis? And then, having conversations about that.
It's been a few weeks since our Academy experience, and I'm still on fire. I hope you are. I continue to hear from our Academy participants about the impact that it made on not only their career, but on their lives. And I just can't thank you enough, Coach Mulkey, for pouring into our participants and having that level of impact on them. Gosh, ladies, we could continue this conversation all day, but I know you've got teams to get back to. And so what I like to do is close out every podcast with this question. And it's for any one of you, if you would like to share a response, but can you give us your advice for how we move the numbers in terms of supporting and increasing the number of women coaches in all sports and levels?
Vanessa, this is Cecile. Let me just say that, first of all, thanks to these two women for participating today, and to think there's 18 other coaches that are just like these women that we'll share in this book. And it's my hope that each one of these women will write their own book in the future. But I think as far as improving the numbers, we've got to observe young women in our programs and even on opponents' teams. Think about the people that might have the right personality, the temperament, the knowledge of the game. And it doesn't have to be a star player. Let's start them out with fifth year aid or sixth year aid, whatever that is now, as a volunteer or a graduate assistant, or have them coach the young clubs in your area. We need women coaching at all levels and coaching men and women. So I hope that we can reach out to the people we know and get them involved.
Vanessa, I think, one of the most disheartening things I've witnessed in my career, and I'm sure we all have at some level, is women not supporting women. So for me, I think we continue to move the numbers. It doesn't matter if it's within our own sport or if it's a sport that we watch every day, but let's just support women in sport, period. And let's support them with our words, with everything that we can do, lift others up around. And I think that's how we're going to move the numbers, is just to continue to reach out and support as much as we possibly can. Sometimes we tend to stay in our lane. I'm acrobatics and tumbling, Carol's basketball. We tend to stay in our lane, but let's just lift everyone up. That's what I love about the Coaches Academy, is it's all sports, and it is really amazing to see that. So I'm going to commit to doing that, you guys. I'm just going to lift everyone up that I possibly can.
For me, mentoring is so huge. I know like a lot of times when we are about to start the season, we have someone from our conference come in and talk about officiating. And at the end of their conversation, they always talk about, we need female referees. We want to grow. We want more women into officiating, college games, and, hope you guys are interested. If you are, just give us a call. But I think we need to reach out in that way as well, especially at the grassroots level. If you notice, there's not a lot of high school or club coaches that are female. And so at any level, we need to encourage, Cecile had mentioned that if you see someone that has the coaching attributes or that is interested, act on that, mentor them, give them the education that they need to get into the sport. But, I want to do whatever I can for the game and share these stories. I think, doing this podcast is going to be really good, very educational for women that, are thinking about getting into coaching.
Well said. And thank you for that advice. Carol, you nailed it. There is a national push right now, a very well orchestrated push with sport officials, sports officiating, to recruit more women and students who played the game to go into officiating. And it's no different when we talk about women in coaching. You talked about the high school and youth level and the lack of women there. I believe the statistic is 24% women coaching at the youth club and high school level, only 3% women coaching men's sports. And so certainly there's lots of opportunities there to move the numbers. And Fee, you're absolutely correct. Women supporting women. Cecile, tapping who's next and intentionally asking and inspiring, helping these women catch a vision for their career by saying, hey, you'd make a great coach. Why don't you consider getting into coaching? I can't thank you enough for the time that you've spent with us. And while listeners at home have received the Cliff Notes here, make sure you order your copy of Winning Ways of Women Coaches today. It's the #1 bestseller on Amazon. And as our country celebrates the golden anniversary of Title IX, this book is a great option to provide as a memento to your men and women on staff, coaches, student athletes, donors. The leadership learnings in this book are transferable to any industry. Thank you again, Cecile, Felecia, Carol, for contributing to the Winning Ways resource. We've loved having you today. Thank you for continuing to dedicate your lives and careers to impacting our next generation of leaders. And thanks for listening to episode 2 of the WeCOACH Podcast, season 5. And thank you again to our sponsor, Hudl, and production partner, WIS Sports. Please join us again on July 14th. Our July podcast installments will feature a 2-part series on the critical topic of mental health and emotional well-being in recognition of July being BIPOC Mental Health Awareness Month. You don't want to miss episodes 3 and 4. Follow us and share your comments on Twitter at WeCOACH and at WIS Sports, or on Facebook at WeCOACH Sports and at WIS Sports. Interested in learning more about any of our upcoming events, resources, membership, and donor options? Please visit our website at wecoachsports.org. And until next time, keep moving the numbers. We teach, we inspire, we motivate, we lead. We coach.